Valera left the house feeling excited and nervous. Today was a crucial day for him, a milestone in his 2-year journey at the construction firm. It was a day of exams and interviews, because the management from the capital had arrived to replace the old branch manager and appoint a new one. Among the 3 candidates vying for the position, Valera was sure that due to his work and training he had every chance of success. Since childhood, Valera was fond of reading and dreamed of becoming a builder. He aspired to create something meaningful, different from those who simply build houses in their backyard. As a child, he often played near the construction site with his friends. However, one unpleasant incident changed his life forever. During the game, a slab suddenly shifted under Valera's feet, as a result of which he lost his balance and fell from a 3-meter height. His body was hit hard by rubble and large pieces of concrete, which led to a 3-month hospitalization and numerous surgeries. Valera's recovery left him bewildered and disconnected from the world around him. His only consolation was the presence of his caring parents, who diligently supported him during this difficult time. One morning, when Valera was lying in bed pretending to be asleep, he heard his parents discussing their financial problems in the kitchen. They were worried about an upcoming surgery that required a significant amount of money. Valera's father offered to sell a kidney to cover the costs, emphasizing their desperate situation. However, his mother expressed doubts about such an unethical decision and urged them to consider alternatives. Valera's father suggested postponing the surgery, but the urgency of the situation kept her on her toes, and she realized that every month decreases the chances of success. This conversation evoked many emotions in Valera: concern for her parents' financial burden, frustration at her own helplessness, and determination to find a way out of this difficult situation. Going into the upcoming big day, Valera carried these thoughts with him. As well as an unshakable faith in his own strength, he was determined to succeed. The chair in the kitchen shook, indicating that his father had stood up abruptly. "Nin, I'm doing the best I can. We've already given all the money. Every last crumb, you know. We even used the money set aside for the car and repairs. It's all gone, you know." You could hear the disappointment in Roma's voice. "I'm not demanding anything, Roma. It's just that I can't get rid of the feeling that you don't care. Do you realize that our son may never recover?" Nin's voice was full of concern. "I do. What about you? What have you done to help him recover? Your meager accountant's salary is barely enough to make ends meet." There was disappointment in Roma's words, but Roma, the sound of the front door slamming shut, interrupted Nin's reply. Valera felt his mother's footsteps approaching and quickly closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep to hide his tears. He waited silently, hoping that he would be taken to the hospital, but as the days passed, he realized that his parents didn't have the funds to treat him, and he would remain bedridden for a long time. In an attempt to distract himself, Valera turned to books and read until fatigue clouded his mind. Despite his best efforts, sleep always found him quickly. And then one fateful day changed everything. The day his life split into 2 halves, before the betrayal and after. His mother, the one person he loved deeply, had simply abandoned him. It happened early one morning. Valera saw his mother in front of him, dressed in ordinary clothes. She set a small travel bag on the floor and crouched on the edge of his bed. "How are you, son?" Valera closed his book and looked up at her. "The usual. Where are you going?" he asked, hoping this was a temporary departure. "Son, I have to go. I came to say goodbye. But I want you to know that I love you more than anything in the world. You'll be taken care of, I promise," she said, and gave him a quick kiss before slipping out the door. Valera didn't immediately realize that his mother's departure wasn't temporary. She was leaving him for good. "My father was by my side, comforting and supporting me." A week later, he managed to find funds for Valera's surgery. With each step on the way to recovery, Valera realized that he no longer had a mother. but a father who meant everything to him. After almost a year of rehabilitation, Valera was able to return to school. His father again arranged for him to take the express exams for the previous year. Knowing how hard he had studied, Valera was able to return to his class. Time passed, and one day Dad brought Oksana home. Although Valera didn't particularly like her, he was always polite, not wanting to hold a grudge against his father. Present tense. As Valera walked to his car, he involuntarily admired the automobile he had bought only 2 weeks ago. Then his attention was caught by a young girl staring at him intently from the sidewalk. At first, Valera thought it might be someone he knew, but on closer inspection, he dismissed the thought. Her outfit seemed outdated, which made it clear that she was not an acquaintance. The girl pulled a photograph out of her pocket. Valera was in the picture, but he looked much younger. With a satisfied sigh, she put the photo back in her bag and walked out of the yard. Valera had a hunch that she would return closer to evening when he got home from work. Valera returned home in high spirits, for he had just become the director of his branch at the age of 29. Parking the car, he opened the trunk and found there a cake and a bag of champagne. Earlier, he had called his father to prepare the table for the party, and although he overheard Oksana suggesting to go to a restaurant, Valera did not spoil his mood. He wanted to be at home, where his father was always there for him and spared no expense to help him recover. Valerie? He turned around and found himself face to face with the girl he had met this morning. Up close, she appeared quite attractive, with blue eyes and a blonde ponytail. Valera wondered if they knew each other in some way. He went through all the possible options in his mind, but he couldn't think of anything good. Giving up, he finally asked, "Do we know each other?" "No, thank God we don't," she replied curtly, "but I need to talk to you." Raising an eyebrow, Valera sensed her hostility. Perhaps he'd met her at Kirill's dacha over the weekend. There'd been a raucous party, and he couldn't remember clearly. "Okay, let's talk. I can spare you 5 minutes," he offered. "I don't need that much time. Your mother is at this address. She is gravely ill. If you don't want to help her, at least pay her a visit. You may not have time to meet again," she said, shoving a piece of paper into his hand. Valera jerked his hand away fearfully. "I don't have a mom," he exclaimed. The girl looked into his eyes, scrutinizing him carefully. "You are mistaken. You have her. And no matter how hard you try to hide from her, she's not going anywhere." "Okay, so be it. But I don't want to see her," Valera replied defiantly. "Take the address, and just think about the fact that not everything in life is as we think it is." "Goodbye," she said, and briskly strode away. The rest of the evening was ruined for Valera. He could not understand why he did not tell his father about the meeting. Maybe he did not want to spoil his father's mood, because he certainly did not deserve it. For the next 2 days, Valera couldn't stop thinking about the note in his pocket. Finally, on Saturday, after a sleepless night, he made up his mind to go, and just to look into the eyes of the woman who had left him like that. It took him a while to find her. He wandered around the outskirts of town, passing by old houses, until he finally spotted her, the same girl. He stopped where he was. "Hello, what's your name?" The girl turned around in surprise and smiled. "You really came?" I replied, "Yes, I wanted to see her face to face. Could you show me how to find this house?" She pointed behind my back and said, "Over there." I turned around and cursed to myself. There was even a house number on the door, which I had completely missed. I walked up the creaky stairs to the second floor and pulled out my phone to make a call, but then changed my mind. I thought about my mom and how she always loved me and took care of me, even when I pretended to be asleep. I needed to stay strong. This woman, my mom, had abandoned me because she was afraid of hardship. My father tried to convince her to stay, promised to find a way to earn money, but she wouldn't listen. She seemed to have found someone else who meant more to her than her own son. Suddenly, there was a loud ringing at the door. I noticed that the door was partially open. As I walked in, I heard a voice say, "Is that you, Natasha?" It was my mom's voice. My mom. I stepped forward and replied, "No, it's not Natasha." The woman lying on the couch screamed, "Sonny, Valerochka." I replied, "Yes, it's me." I couldn't bring myself to help her or even touch her. I didn't want to. I think Nina felt it. She said, "Sit down, son. There's a chair over there." I sat down and looked around. The poverty in this place was overwhelming. Everything seemed clean, but it felt like I was in a homeless shelter. There was a woman screaming loudly outside. My mom smiled and said, "It's just the neighbors causing trouble. It's a common thing in our neighborhood. How are you doing, son?" Valera smirked, thinking to himself that it was too late to ask such questions. Then he was struck by his mother's gaze, and he noticed a child's photograph on the table next to the sofa. It was clear his mother had been dumped by her boyfriend long ago, probably because of her illness. It seems that she found out that he was doing well in life and decided to extort money from him. Now Valera understood everything. "Why were you looking for me? What do you want?" "Money?" he asked, not wanting to be deceived by her. "You didn't have to make all this drama. And can't you at least offer me some tea?" Nina tried to stand up again, but she didn't have the strength for it. With tears in her eyes, she apologized to her son, explaining that she couldn't get up. At that moment, Natasha entered the room and rushed to Nina, reprimanding her for trying to get up. She then turned to Valera and asked why he had allowed it to happen. Valera replied, "Maybe that's what you should have done. I understand your plan now. You could have just asked for money instead of making up this whole spectacle." Natasha squinted her eyes and replied, "Money? You'll never be able to repay that debt. You're making a scene here for no reason. Who needs you?" Natasha's words angered and hurt Valera. He realized that it was convenient for her to pretend that he didn't know the truth. Natasha urged him to leave, saying that his mother had seen enough of him. A sigh came from the couch where Nina was lying. Natasha turned around, rushed to Nina, and urgently shouted to Valera, "Call an ambulance. She has a heart condition." Valera reached for the phone, feeling confused and lost. Was his mother really calling him to see him before she died? Maybe to apologize? And this unreasonable woman just wouldn't let her. The ambulance took Nina to the hospital, and Valera followed. After making sure that Nina's mother received the necessary help, he approached the doctor and asked, "When can I visit her?" The doctor replied, "Tomorrow afternoon. Be sure to come. The situation is not very favorable." Valera left the hospital and immediately noticed Natasha sobbing on a nearby bench. Concerned, he approached her and asked, "Why are you crying?" Natasha tearfully replied, "Are you sure they'll let you visit her tomorrow?" Valera assured her, "Yes, I'm sure. Can I give you a ride home?" "If it's no trouble," she replied. As they drove out of the hospital parking lot, Valera pondered the need to return the next day to give his mother a chance to apologize and calm down. If she was counting on things working out between them, she was in for a disappointment. They pulled up to a familiar house, and Valera asked curiously, "Where are you going?" Natasha smiled and replied, "I live in the same house as Aunt Nina, but in a different driveway." "Oh, so you're neighbors," replied Valera, feeling a little awkward. Natasha nonchalantly continued, "Does that surprise you?" Valera hesitated half a word. "No, it's just..." Interrupting him, Natasha asked, "Are you going to see your mom tomorrow?" "Yes, I promised the doctor I'd come," Valera replied. Curiosity sparked in him as he pondered Natasha's actions. "May I ask what time you plan to come?" Feeling a sense of satisfaction, Valera wondered if she had feelings for him. 3:00, he replied. "Okay, then I'll come later. I don't think you'll be there for long," Natasha said with a note of ambiguity. Valera wondered in bewilderment. Why later? He asked. Thinking he had misunderstood, Natasha got out of the car. But before closing the door, she replied, "To be at odds with you." When the door slammed shut, Valera stared at her for a while, then shook his head. Natasha had already disappeared into the entryway. He slammed his palms on the steering wheel disappointedly and muttered, "This is too much. What is she playing at? Mother Teresa." He drove the car back home, seething with anger. His mother had abandoned him when he was sick, refusing to carry the burden. And now, with the help of this mean girl, she was trying to make him feel guilty about something. He wouldn't stand for it. He had been fooled by everyone. He wasn't even going to go to the hospital tomorrow. Let them deal with their own mess. Valera was so consumed with rage that he didn't notice the red light. With a squeal of brakes, there was a collision that plunged him into darkness. He couldn't wake up, or rather, he did, but he couldn't fully regain consciousness. There was no pain, only a vast emptiness surrounding him. Yet he could hear everything. Why couldn't he wake up? Footsteps were approaching, barely audible. "Hello!" It was the little troublemaker Natasha. Valera made a huge effort on himself and opened his eyes. Natasha immediately disappeared, and a moment later the doctor's face appeared in front of him. "What's your name?" the doctor asked. "Valerie. And what is your middle name?" "Romanovich." "How old are you?" 29. "That's good." The doctor shined a flashlight into Valera's eyes, causing him to instinctively close them. "Very good. Rest for now." The doctor disappeared and Natasha reappeared. "I'll be quick. You haven't been away long. Your stepmother is such an unpleasant woman. How did you ever put up with living with her? She managed to convince everyone here to sign a document that you wouldn't be helpless after your injury. Your father tried to calm her down, but she threatened him with divorce, saying she couldn't live under the same roof with an invalid." Valera wasn't surprised. He was used to people leaving him as soon as something happened to him. "You mean Mom, right?" Natasha's eyes beamed warily. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "That's not very kind of you. May I ask who I'm talking to? I thought at first that perhaps you had hit your head so hard that it brought your thoughts back into place, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I originally had a better opinion of you. I was hoping you'd at least try to get to the bottom of this and find out who was responsible. But you..." "I can't find the right words to describe my disappointment," Natasha said, shaking her head. "Anyway, I wish you a speedy recovery." She continued and headed for the door. Valera stared after her, closing his eyes. He had never thought there was a person who could make him lose his temper so quickly. And this despite the fact that he was lying here, stuffed with injections. How weak he felt. What was it Natasha kept saying? What truth did she claim he didn't know that would change the way he looked at the world? His head was throbbing. Now he wanted to uncover this terrible secret that Natasha kept talking about. On the other hand, she could just tell him herself instead of creating confusion and running away. The doctor came to see him in the evening. "How are you feeling?" the doctor asked. "All right, I guess," replied Valera. "I have some good news. It's not as bad as it looks. You can sit up and even try to move around a bit," the doctor informed him. Valera immediately sat up. He felt dizzy, but it was manageable. "Doctor, can you tell me something? Yesterday, a woman named Nina, most likely Karpova, but it could be another surname, she came to see you. How do I find her?" asked Valera. The doctor clapped himself on the forehead in a sign of realization. "I was wondering why I remembered you. It was you who came with her, wasn't it?" said the doctor. "Yes, I did," Valera confirmed. "I hospitalized her, and she is now in room 7, across the hall from here," the doctor informed him. "I need to see her," Valera stated firmly. "I'm afraid that's not possible right now. We need to observe you for a day or two before we consider traveling The doctor stated and left. Valera waited another half hour until the hospital was quiet. Slowly he made his way to the door and looked out into the hallway. No one was visible except for the cheerful voices coming from the nurse's room. Valera walked along the wall to the opposite door and finally entered the room. The corridor was empty, which gave him the perfect opportunity. With the patients taken care of, the staff finally had a chance to rest and eat. Room number 7 was waiting for him, and there was no time to hesitate. He opened the door, slowly adjusting his eyes to the dim lighting. There she was, his mother, lying by the window. 2 beds were unoccupied, and at the other end of the room lay a sleeping woman. "Valeruchka," he called out, hoping she would sense his presence. She looked up at him with fear in her eyes, noticing the bandage on her forehead. "What happened to you, son?" she asked worriedly. "Nothing much, just a bump on my head. But that's not important right now." "I need to know why you left me," he replied, determined to figure it out. "I want to know who or what made you abandon a sick child." His mother was silent for a moment before replying. "I didn't abandon you, Valera. I had no other choice." "That's a lie. I remember you saying goodbye to me. No one forced you to leave home. It was your decision, wasn't it?" He pressed. "Okay, I'll admit it. It was my decision. No one forced me," she admitted. "Then tell me the reason and I'll leave," Valera demanded, feeling frustrated. He hoped that after listening to her explanation, he could find it in his heart to forgive and help her. "The reason is you," she finally admitted. "I know a sick child is a heavy burden, but I didn't just abandon you." Valera tried to comprehend her words. "I understand everything, but why did you leave?" "Sit down, it's not a short story," his mother sighed, closing her eyes. "Your surgery kept getting postponed. I realized that with each postponement, the chances of success diminished. We had no money, no matter how hard I tried. I tried taking out loans and even mortgaged our apartment, but the amounts offered were never enough to cover the costs. 3 months after you were discharged, I noticed that our dad had a peculiar smell of someone else's perfume and lipstick stains on his shirt. It dawned on me that Roma was no help. He was self-absorbed and living his own life. This realization prompted me to take action as soon as possible." Valera looked at his mother in complete bewilderment. Something must have been said wrong. After all, Dad had always been there for them. He had managed to find the necessary money, although Valera had never questioned its source. Moreover, he distinctly remembered that after his operation, their life had gotten better. His father even opened his own small business. Of course, he was rarely at home, but Valera, although he was not quite an adult, understood that his father had to work hard. Nina continued, telling her story. "One day, exhausted from running to the banks, I sat on a park bench and cried. And then I got a phone call. I looked up and saw my friend, with whom I had not seen for almost a year because of recent events. We sat down and talked. She was berating your father and expressing her resentment. Before we parted, she said, 'I'll think about it. And if I think of anything, I'll call you right away.' Luck or not, just 2 days later, the daughter of her friend's boss's boss ran over a man, killing him. After hitting him, the daughter fled the scene. Noticing her boss's distress, Oksana, who had a good relationship with her, asked if anything was wrong. Nina confided in her, and together they worked out a plan to get out of the situation. Oksana called me in the evening and told me that her boss was willing to pay twice as much as necessary for the operation. I had an hour to think about the offer while Dad was away. When Dad returned the next morning, I told him everything and he was supportive. He assured me that he would do everything he could to minimize the consequences for me. In addition, Oksana offered to put the remaining money towards hiring the best lawyer to mitigate the punishment. They offered to take the blame for the supervisor's daughter. Even though I knew I wouldn't see you for a long time, this arrangement would allow you to live freely again. He was unable to attend the trial as he was in the hospital with you. Oksana didn't show up either, but I was sure you were already being treated and assumed the case would be reviewed later. In the end, I was sentenced to 9 years, although I can't understand why it was so long. Something else was discovered, and perhaps the deceased was no ordinary person. As you can imagine, there was no review of the case, no lawyers, nothing. I could not reveal the truth as it would have made matters worse. The payment was made, and you were able to reschedule the surgery. This woman kept her promise. I was released on parole after serving 7 years and went straight home. I wanted to see you so badly, but when Oksana opened the door for me, I couldn't believe it. This can't be happening. Is that her? Oksana, is that her? Unfortunately, yes. She's the one who insisted on keeping it that way. She's the one my father sought solace from at night. I don't blame him. Not everyone can bear what we went through at home. Images began to form in Valera's mind. Money, a better life, Oksana. It all seemed so simple, except he always thought it was even simpler. I left. Oksana explained that you despise me and Daddy loves her. You have a family and I'm no longer needed. I rented this cheap apartment in a barracks and got a job at the factory. I often passed by the house, then by the institute. I watched you from afar. I cried and admired you. You grew into a handsome and intelligent man. I am incredibly proud of you. I never wanted to interfere in your life. However, Natasha, I once made the mistake of telling her everything. Natasha has held a grudge against me ever since. And when I got sick, she decided to find you. I was against it, but she persisted. Yes, that's right. Valera was silent for a moment, processing the information and gradually getting used to it. Why didn't you come to me earlier? Why didn't you tell me? Well, even if I hadn't listened, you could have written a letter. But Nina was silent. Valera plucked up courage and spoke. Mom, can you hear me? There was silence again. Valera rushed to the bed. Nina's hand was dangling lifelessly. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Her eyes were closed. Her lips seemed pale and even bluish. Mom. He touched her, but her hand slipped away like a rag. Valera grabbed his mother by the shoulders. Mom. Mom. Not now. Please. He shook her and screamed. Tears streamed down her face, and Nina hit her head on the pillow. Mommy. Someone pulled him forcibly away from the bed, and suddenly he felt a sharp jab in his shoulder. Then everything went blank. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay close to his mother. When he woke up, he found he was in his own room. His father was sitting next to him. Valera looked at him, not understanding how he could continue to live like this. Why couldn't he live his life without hatred? He despised his mother so deeply, and now he was expected to despise his father as well. Dad! Roman turned to his son as he stirred and opened his eyes. Son! Dad, is it true? Asked Valera, searching his father's eyes. Yes, Valera, it's all true. Roman replied, his voice heavy with grief. I'm so sorry, but it's just the way things turned out. I understand if you don't want to see me anymore, and honestly, that's okay. I bought a ticket to go visit my sister. Her husband died, and she's struggling to raise 2 kids. I left everything for you. You'll find the necessary documents at home. Oksana went with the luckier man. Goodbye, son. And if it is possible, forgive me. His father moved toward the door, as if expecting Valera to stop him. Valera wanted to call out to him, but restrained himself. Son, why are you so restless? Came a voice. You have a wedding today, and you're acting like a little boy. It was Nina, looking at her son with a smile. Valera was either adjusting his tie or changing it to a bow tie. Nina had just returned from Germany 2 months ago after a complicated heart surgery. Valera had sold his father's business to pay for it as soon as he learned the surgery was possible. Nina tried to talk him out of it, but he was determined. That money is already yours, insisted Valera. Nina was almost unrecognizable. It was as if she had shed 20 years from her appearance. Mom, how can you not worry? Exclaimed Valera. Exclaimed Valera. Exclaimed Valera. You don't know Natasha. She's the kind of person who will change her mind 100 times and run away. Nina burst into laughter. She won't change her mind. She loves you. Mom, really? Do you really believe that? Valera sat down next to her on the couch, and she hugged him. Of course she does. I think she fell in love with you as soon as she saw you. Don't let me down. They both giggled. And just like that, they became one family, sharing their secrets and laughter.